Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Recently, I wrote an article for Crisis Magazine. It's an open letter to the bishops of Canada about the recent developments with the history of residential schools in Canada. And I'm going to read that for you here today. Please share this far and wide. This is something I believe in strongly, and I hope that it can be helpful. Here goes. Open letter to the bishops of Canada. Dear bishops of Canada, recently, a radical left-wing politician in Canada put forth a private member's bill seeking to criminalize residential school denialism. According to the politician, the Government of Canada system of boarding schools for Native children that was facilitated largely by the Catholic Church in Canada committed genocide. As a result, this person believes that any Canadian who denies the quote-unquote genocide should be criminally charged. Leaving aside the fact that private members' bills rarely ever make it past the first reading, this is still a cause for alarm and reflection, and I believe the bishops of Canada must take this as a wake-up call. Before I continue, please know that it's not my intention to offend or disrespect the offices that you all hold, which are apostolic. That being said, there are some harsh truths that should be considered, and I cannot mince words when the truth is at stake. We all lived through the awful summer of 2021, when dozens of Catholic parishes were either burned to the ground or damaged severely by malcontents and activists who hate the Church. Of course, these acts of bigotry and violence were spurred on by the bogus claims that Catholic schools had murdered thousands of unnamed Native children and thrown them into quote-unquote mass graves. At this point, anyone with even half of their wits about them knows that the whole mass grave hoax was just that. A hoax. Nevertheless, the public was more than willing to accept the narrative without even giving it a second thought, because they had been indoctrinated with the myriad lies that plagued the Church in our once great nation and abroad. Virtually all Catholics and non-Catholics in Canada have accepted a black legend of sorts about our beloved Church and seem to believe that the Catholic Church is an archaic organization with a very dark past. This is, of course, a lie. You, bishops, are all in charge of Catholic education in Canada. As a former Catholic school teacher, I can tell you that Catholic schools are not immune from this lie, and I would argue that Catholic educators are often the worst offenders in this regard. In any event, what makes this whole saga so tragic goes beyond denial of the fact that there were no mass graves and that there was no genocide. Many Canadians are willing to accept the fact that what was reported was false, as is evidenced by the growing awareness of this fact in much of the mainstream press. However, the public must know that not only were there no veritable concentration camps run by nuns and priests, but the schools run by the Church were exceptional. The nuns and priests who braved the harshest climates of Canada during their early years of development were not maniacal murderers who sought to abuse children. On the contrary, they were the spiritual sons and daughters of the great missionaries who watered the soil of our country with their blood. They followed the lead of the great martyrs Brébeuf, Jogues, and their companions. When these great men arrived on our shores, they found a civilization, if we can call it that, groping around in the dark of a diabolical paganism. Reading their journals, one is shocked with horror at what they report. Mass starvation was rampant. Children were so malnourished that they routinely suffered from physical and mental disabilities. There was nothing resembling true marriage, and women were often treated no better than whores and objects. In some cases, if sled dogs were injured or died, women would pull the sleds and be whipped by their masters if they did so poorly. Cannibalism was not uncommon, and they enjoyed no written language. Our great martyrs did not flee from this challenge. On the contrary, they embraced their own deaths, the most gruesome deaths imaginable, if they could only save one soul. In fact, Brébeuf loved the people of our country so much that when he was summoned home the first time, he is recorded as saying that he was not worthy to stay in Canada because of his sins. Can you fathom such a deep love of souls, such as his? If we were all to do an examination of conscience and compare it to Brébeuf's, doubtless we would seem like Satan incarnate when compared to him. Nonetheless, he saw his first exit from this land filled with iniquity and savagery as a punishment. Could any of us even dare to stand in the same room with a man such as him, and do anything but weep at our frailty and unworthiness to breathe the same air. Your Excellencies, you are all the heirs of his great sacrifice. It is said that we are all standing on the shoulders of giants. Well, in the case of Brebeuf, it is said that he was such an imposing man that he would carry 2 canoes while portaging long distances across Huronia. To say that you stand on the shoulders of giants is a literal truth. And this mountain of a man stood on the holy shoulders of Christ, the same sacred shoulders that bore the cross that is the instrument of our salvation. Respectfully, what have you done to honor this great man? Have you stood boldly in the public square and told the truth without compromise or concern for political correctness? Have you led the Catholic school systems that you rightly oversee into the truth? I believe you all know the answers to these questions. Sadly, it seems that the truth of our great history, especially that of the greatness of the Church's schools, has been deemed unessential, just like the sacraments when most, if not all of you, did obeisance to the secular power during that moronic extended flu season of 2020 to 2022. Our forefathers thought nothing of scurvy or having their brains splattered on the frozen ground by tomahawks if it meant they could deliver the sacraments to souls headed to perdition. Yet the successors to the apostles in present-day Canada seem more afraid of bad news headlines and public perception than Brebeuf was of having his literal heart ripped from his chest while he was still conscious. Some of you even sidelined unvaccinated priests if they did not comply with your diocesan mandates, which is made all the more ironic considering we have been led to believe since Vatican II that the conscience is sacrosanct. I say all this, and again, I apologize if I have offended you, because I want to see you in heaven. Of course, I need your prayers, because I am a sinner, and I could squander my eternal inheritance as easily as anyone. However, I am a layman who will not be judged as harshly as you will when you die. When you die, and you will all die, there will be no opportunity to explain to the judge why you stood back and did little more than nothing to defend his church in our country. Your bodies will decay in caskets 6 feet under the ground, the same ground watered by Brebeuf's sacrificial blood. And I pray that your souls do not decay in an even deeper pit. Please, I beg you, find even just an ounce of courage and defend our history, our saints, and our blessed Lord. So much damage has been done under your watch, but it is not too late. All you need to do is tell the truth and tell it boldly. I can guarantee you that as uncomfortable or as unpopular as this may feel, it will feel nothing like the hot irons that cooked the living flesh of our martyrs or the boiling water that was poured over their heads while they still breathed. I can also guarantee many will convert and save their souls if you act rightly, as they did after our martyrs were sacrificed. All you have to do is say a few words, and you can do it from the comfort of your temperature-controlled cathedrals. You will not be frostbitten or develop a disease from malnutrition. Please, Your Excellencies, if you will not do it for the sake of our martyrs or the souls of your sheep, please do it for the sake of your own souls. Time waits for no man, and you will all run out sooner rather than later. In Christ, Kennedy Hall.